The text came while I was sitting in traffic on I-25, the afternoon sun glaring off the car in front of me. In the passenger seat was a small, cheerfully wrapped gift bag. Inside was a pair of seashell earrings, delicate silver hooks holding tiny pearlescent cowries. I'd bought them for my mom to wear on the family cruise. They looked like something a person would wear while standing on a balcony, smelling the salt in the air. I could already picture her smiling, touching one of them, maybe even telling me I had good taste for once. My phone buzzed against the console. I glanced down, expecting a reminder about a work meeting or maybe a message from a friend. It was from my mom. I smiled before I even read it. Then I read it. "You're not coming. Dad wants just family." That was it. 7 words. No apology, no explanation, just a flat, cold dismissal. My smile dissolved. My breath caught in my chest. I read the words again, thinking my eyes were playing tricks on me. Maybe it was a typo. Maybe she meant to send it to someone else. But it was right there, under her name. A clean, brutal sentence. The cruise I had paid for. The one I had spent the last 6 months planning, right down to the dinner reservations. The one I had covered entirely with my bonus check from work. The one I had pulled all-nighters for weeks to earn. My family's dream vacation, funded by me, and I was no longer invited. The car behind me honked. I looked up and saw the light had turned green. My hands were trembling on the steering wheel. I pressed the gas, my foot feeling heavy and disconnected from my body. The gift bag on the seat beside me suddenly looked pathetic. The seashell earrings felt like a joke. I drove, but I didn't know where I was going. I just followed the flow of traffic, my mind a complete blank, except for those 7 words playing over and over. Dad wants just family. The implication was so clear it felt like a slap. I wasn't family. Not real family anyway. I was the provider, the facilitator, the bank account. I was the person you called when you needed something, not the person you wanted around to actually enjoy it. I'm Millie Miller. I'm 33 years old. I live in a condo in Denver that I bought myself, and for my entire life, I have tried to be a good daughter, a good sister, a good person. I thought being good meant being generous. I thought love was something you proved with action, with support, with sacrifice. But sitting in my car, staring at that text message, I finally understood. That wasn't love. That was a transaction. And the transaction was complete. They had what they wanted. They didn't need me anymore. That was the moment the fog I had lived in for 3 decades finally started to clear. It was the moment I realized my parents didn't see me as a daughter they loved, but as a resource they could tap. I was their emergency fund, their safety net, their ticket to a better life. And now that the ticket had been punched, my presence was no longer required. It was, in fact, an inconvenience. Before I tell you how everything flipped, like and subscribe, drop a comment, where are you watching from? Growing up, I thought love was spelled R-E-S-C-U-E. My entire childhood was built around the idea that my role in the Miller family was to be the fixer, the responsible one, the little adult who cleaned up messes she didn't make. It started small. My younger sister, Vanessa, would break a lamp, and I'd be the one to take the blame because I knew my parents were already stressed about money, and Vanessa's tears were more convincing than mine. I learned early on that a quiet sacrifice was easier than a loud confrontation. The first big rescue happened when I was 16. Dad's small construction business, the one he'd poured his life into, folded. The 2008 recession hit our family like a hurricane. I remember the quiet that fell over the house. The phone would ring, and my parents would just stare at it. The tension was so thick you could barely breathe. Dad spent his days on the couch, watching TV with the sound off, while Mom tried to stretch a box of pasta into 3 meals. I was working 2 part-time jobs after school. One at a greasy spoon diner, one stocking shelves at a grocery store. My paychecks weren't much, but to me they were everything. They were my ticket to a used car, to college application fees, to a life outside my suffocating little town. One night, I came home late, smelling of dishwater and floor cleaner, and found my mom crying at the kitchen table with a stack of bills in front of her. The orange final notice stamp seemed to glow under the dim light. Without thinking, I went to my room, pulled the wad of cash I'd been saving from under my mattress, and put it on the table next to her. It was over $500. It was my entire world. She looked at the money, then at me, and her expression wasn't gratitude. It was a strange mix of relief and shame. "Oh, Millie," she whispered, "you shouldn't have to." But she took it. She never paid me back. That became the pattern. I was the emergency plan. When Vanessa decided to go to a private liberal arts college we couldn't afford, I was the one who co-signed the loans. I was working my first real job in marketing, barely making enough to cover my own rent and student debt. But Vanessa had a dream. She wanted the college experience. That experience lasted 1 semester. She dropped out, citing creative differences with her professors, and came home with nothing but a mountain of debt. My parents fretted. "This will ruin her credit," Dad said. "She'll never be able to get a fresh start." So I gave her one. I took on a freelance gig on nights and weekends, writing marketing copy for businesses until my eyes burned. It took me 2 years, but I paid off every single one of her student loans. My thank you was Vanessa telling me I was lucky that I was good with money, as if it were a hobby and not a brutal necessity. She never got a full-time job. She bounced from one passion project to another, all funded by my parents, who were, in turn, often funded by me. Every family emergency somehow became my emergency. Every unexpected bill landed in my lap. And every single time I helped, the thank you came with another request already attached. They didn't call me Millie. They called me the responsible one. And for years, I wore that title like a badge of honor. I thought it meant they trusted me, that they saw me as capable and strong. I never realized that responsible was just their code for convenient. I was the family ATM, and my personal identification number was guilt. After college, I worked relentlessly. I poured everything I had into my career in marketing analytics. I was good at it. I could see patterns in data that others missed. I climbed the ladder fast, got promotions, and earned bonuses. I bought my first condo at 29. I had a 401k and a savings account. I was building a life my parents could only dream of, and I thought they'd be proud. Instead, my success seemed to irritate them. It was like my stability highlighted their lack of it, and they resented me for it. Over Sunday dinners, Mom would look around my clean, modern condo and say things like, "Money changes people, Millie. It can make them cold." Dad would nod in agreement, adding, "Don't forget where you came from." I never did. That was the problem. I never forgot the look on my mom's face at that kitchen table. I never forgot the silence of my dad on the couch. I never forgot the feeling that if I didn't hold everything together, it would all fall apart. That's why, when the idea of a family cruise came up, I didn't hesitate for a second. It was another chance to rescue them, to fix things, to buy their happiness, and maybe, finally buy their love. It started as a throwaway comment over dinner at my place. I'd made pot roast, my dad's favorite. We were sitting around my dining table, the one I'd saved for a year to buy. For a moment, things felt normal, almost peaceful. Then my mom sighed, a theatrical, wistful sound she had perfected over the years. She stared out the window at the Denver skyline. "You know," she said, her voice soft and full of longing. "Your father and I have always dreamed of seeing the Caribbean, a real family vacation on one of those big ships." Dad picked up on his cue perfectly. He sighed too, a heavier, more burdened sound. "But cruises are expensive, honey. Way out of our league." Vanessa, who was scrolling through her phone, chimed in without looking up. "Yeah, it would be nice to get away from all this stress." What stress, I was never sure. Her biggest daily challenge was deciding which reality show to watch. I looked at their faces. My mom's hopeful expression, my dad's manufactured look of defeat, my sister's casual entitlement. It was a perfectly choreographed performance, and I was the intended audience. A few years ago, I would have missed it. But now, with a little distance, I could see the strings. Still, a part of me, the 16-year-old girl who just wanted to make her parents happy, took the bait. I wanted to believe it wasn't an act. I wanted to believe this could be the thing that finally fixed us. I remember smiling, feeling that familiar rush of being the solution. "Let me handle it," I said. "I just got my bonus at work. It was a good quarter." They protested, but it was the kind of weak, half-hearted protest that really means please, please keep insisting. "Oh no, Millie, we couldn't ask you to do that," Mom said, while already looking at Dad with a spark in her eye. "That's your money. You worked hard for it. It's for the family," I insisted. "It would make me happy. We could all go, all of us together." And that was that. The deal was sealed. Their faces lit up. Suddenly, I was the hero again. For the rest of the dinner, they were full of praise. They loved the pot roast. They loved my condo. They loved their responsible, generous daughter. The warmth in the room was intoxicating. I soaked it up, telling myself this was what a real family felt like. The next week was a blur of planning. I spent hours every night on cruise websites, comparing itineraries, reading reviews, and finding the perfect ship. I didn't just book any tickets. I booked the best. I got 6 tickets in total for Mom, Dad, Vanessa, her on-again, off-again boyfriend, Brandon, and my aunt and uncle, who my mom insisted couldn't be left out. I upgraded their rooms to have balconies overlooking the ocean. I booked excursions at every port, snorkeling in the Bahamas, exploring ancient ruins in Mexico, ziplining through a rainforest in Jamaica. I prepaid for premium dining packages so they could eat at the fancy steakhouses and Italian restaurants on board. I added Wi-Fi upgrades and unlimited drink passes. I thought of everything. I wanted this to be perfect, a memory so flawless it would erase all the bad ones. The total came to $21,840. $21,840. I stared at the number on my screen for a long time before I clicked confirm payment. It was more than I'd ever spent on anything besides the down payment on my condo. It was a significant chunk of my savings, but as I typed in my credit card information, I told myself it was worth it. This was an investment in my family. This was my chance to finally, truly connect with them, to feel like I was a part of something instead of just the person who funded it from the sidelines. I forwarded the confirmation emails and booking receipts to the family group chat. I waited for the excited phone calls, for the flood of exclamation points, for a message that said, "Thank you, Millie. This is the most wonderful thing anyone has ever done for us." A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Mom, a single red heart emoji. That was my thank you. That was all I got. For $21,000 and the hope of a lifetime, I got a tiny digital heart. And fool that I was, I told myself it was enough. A month before the cruise, I decided to send them a small pre-vacation gift. I found a website that did custom embroidery and ordered matching navy blue polo shirts for everyone. In neat white script over the chest, it said, Miller Family Cruise 2025. It was a little cheesy, I knew, but I imagined us all wearing them for a group photo on the deck of the ship. I pictured the photo sitting on my mantelpiece, a tangible piece of evidence that we were a happy family. I packed them carefully in a box and mailed it to my parents' house. A few days passed. I didn't hear anything. I told myself they were just busy. Maybe they wanted to thank me in person. But a quiet, cold knot was forming in my stomach. I checked the tracking number. The package had been delivered 2 days ago. Still, silence. Then, the next morning, my phone buzzed with the text that broke my world open. The one I saw while sitting in traffic. "You're not coming. Dad wants just family." My first thought was that it had to be a joke. A really mean, unfunny joke. But a joke nonetheless. My dad's sense of humor could be blunt. I texted back a single question mark. My phone buzzed again almost immediately. Another message from Mom. "It'll be less awkward this way. Vanessa deserves a break." Less awkward? What did that even mean? My heart started pounding against my ribs. My hands felt cold. Vanessa deserved a break? A break from what? She hadn't worked a real job in 3 years. Her entire life was a break, paid for by me. I tried to call my mom. The phone rang once, then went straight to voicemail. I tried my dad. Straight to voicemail. I called Vanessa. Voicemail. They were avoiding me. All of them. Panic set in. I opened our family group chat to type a message to ask what was going on, but the chat was gone. It wasn't in my message list anymore. My thumb fumbled as I searched for it, my mind refusing to accept what my eyes were seeing. Had they deleted the whole chat? Then a worse thought occurred to me. I went to Vanessa's contact info and tried to add her to a new group. An error message popped up. I wasn't friends with her on the messaging app anymore. I had been removed. Kicked out. My blood ran cold. I sat there on my couch, the city lights twinkling outside my window, and felt a kind of loneliness I had never experienced before. It was a deep, gutting emptiness. I had been erased with a few clicks. Later that night, I got a text from my cousin, Sarah. She was one of the few people in my extended family who saw the dynamic for what it was. She sent me a screenshot. No words, just a picture. It was from a new group chat, one I wasn't in. The name of the chat was Miller Cruise Crew. In the screenshot, my sister Vanessa had posted a picture of herself holding up one of the navy polo shirts I had sent. Her caption read, "Got our cruise swag. So excited for a drama-free trip. Thank God Millie decided she was too busy with work to come." The winky face at the end was what destroyed me. The casual, smug cruelty of it. They had created a whole new narrative. I wasn't uninvited. I was just too busy. They were taking the trip I paid for and painting me as the person who was too self-important to even show up. The cruise I paid for, the rooms I upgraded, the excursions I painstakingly chose, and I wasn't invited. I sat on my couch all night, the blue light from my laptop screen illuminating the invoices and booking confirmations. There it was, over and over again. Billed to Millie Miller, cardholder, Millie Miller, contact email, Millie Miller, email, com. Every single part of their dream vacation was tied to my name, my money, my work. I didn't cry. The hurt was too deep for tears. It was a cold, hard rage that settled deep in my bones. I looked at my name on those documents, and something shifted inside me. They had pushed me out. They had made me the villain of their story. They thought they could take everything from me and then just throw me away. And as I stared at the invoices, I realized something. I didn't need revenge. Revenge was messy and emotional. What I needed was control, and they had just reminded me that I had all of it. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there as the sky outside my window turned from black to gray to a soft, hazy pink. When the sun came up, I felt a strange sense of calm. The emotional storm had passed, and in its place was a quiet, unshakable clarity. I knew exactly what I had to do. At 8:01 a.m., I made a pot of coffee and sat down at my laptop. I pulled up the cruise confirmation email and found the customer service number for the travel agency I'd booked through. I took a deep breath, took a sip of coffee, and dialed. A friendly voice answered on the other end. "Thank you for calling Oceanic Getaways. This is Brenda. How can I help you today?" I made my own voice smooth and polite, devoid of any of the anger churning inside me. "Hi, Brenda. My name is Millie Miller. I'm calling about a booking I made for the Miller family cruise. Confirmation number 74B3982. There was a soft clicking of a keyboard. "Yes, Miss Miller. I have your reservation right here. A party of 6, heading to the Eastern Caribbean on the Starlight Serenity. Looks like a wonderful trip. How can I help you?" "I need to make a few adjustments to the booking," I said calmly. "Of course," she replied. "What did you have in mind?" This was the moment, the point of no return. "First," I began, looking at the list of add-ons I had paid for. "I need to cancel the premium dining packages for all guests." "All 6, Miss Miller?" Brenda asked, a hint of surprise in her voice. "All 6, I confirmed. They'll just use the main buffet and complimentary dining rooms." Another click. "Okay, that's been removed. The refund of $1,800 will be credited back to your card on file within 3 to 5 business days." A small jolt of satisfaction went through me. "Great. Next, I need to cancel the unlimited Wi-Fi upgrades and the premium drink passes for all guests." "Okay," Brenda said, her voice now purely professional. "That's another refund of $2,460. "Excellent," I said. I went down the list. The snorkeling excursion, the ziplining tour, the private cabana I'd reserved for them on the beach. Cancelled, cancelled, cancelled. With every click of Brenda's keyboard, I felt a little bit lighter. I was taking back every piece of my generosity they had taken for granted. Finally, I got to the big one. "Brenda, I also need to make a change to the cabin assignments." "All right, what kind of change?" "The 5 balcony suites under the names of Richard Miller, Susan Miller, Vanessa Miller, Brandon Smith, and our aunt and uncle, I need to downgrade them." There was a slight pause on the other end of the line. "Downgrade them, ma'am?" "Yes," I said, my voice unwavering. "Please move them to the most basic interior cabins available, the cheapest ones you have, preferably on a low deck, near the engine room if possible." The silence on the other end was a little longer this time. I could picture Brenda, probably a nice woman in a cubicle somewhere, wondering what kind of family drama she had just stumbled into. "Okay, Miss Miller," she finally said slowly. "I can move them to deck 2. They're small interior rooms, no window." "Is that acceptable?" "That's perfect," I said, a real smile touching my lips for the first time in 24 hours. "And what about your ticket, Miss Miller?" Brenda asked. "The master suite on the penthouse deck. Do you want to cancel that as well?" This was the most important part of the plan. This was where control turned into justice. "No," I said, my voice bright and clear. "I'll keep mine. I'll be there." I paused for effect, just not with them. The 2 weeks between my phone call to the travel agent and the day of the cruise were the quietest of my life. I expected a storm. I braced myself for a barrage of furious phone calls, angry texts, maybe even an unannounced visit from my parents, demanding to know what I had done. But there was nothing, just a profound and unnerving silence. It was as if, by removing me from their vacation plans, They had simply removed me from their lives entirely. They had no idea that the plans had been altered, that their dream trip had been systematically dismantled. They were floating along in blissful ignorance, and I was letting them. Boarding the ship in Miami was a surreal experience. I had always traveled with family or friends, a constant buzz of chatter and negotiation filling the air. This time, I walked up the gangway alone. I watched other families laughing and taking pictures, parents trying to corral excited children, and I felt a small pang, not of loneliness, but of a strange, liberating detachment. I wasn't responsible for anyone's happiness but my own. The thought was so new it was almost startling. My name was on the manifest for the penthouse master suite. A porter took my single suitcase and led me to a private elevator. The suite was breathtaking. It was larger than my first apartment, with a sprawling living area, a king-sized bed, a marble bathroom with a jacuzzi tub, and a massive private balcony that wrapped around the corner of the ship, offering a 180-degree view of the ocean. A bottle of champagne was chilling in an ice bucket next to a welcome note addressed to Miss Miller. I stood on the balcony, the warm sea breeze on my face, and felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. This was my space, my sanctuary, a place they couldn't touch. I knew the confrontation was coming. The ship, while massive, was a closed environment. It was only a matter of time. I spent the first day settling in, deliberately enjoying the solitude. I unpacked my clothes in the walk-in closet. I took a long bath. I ordered room service and ate on my balcony, watching Miami fade into the distance. I felt like a spy, an observer in a social experiment of my own creation. I wondered where they were. I pictured them arriving at the port, handing their luggage to a porter, and being directed not to the grand suites on the upper decks, but to the cramped windowless cabins on deck 2. I imagined their confusion turning to indignation as they opened the door to a room the size of a closet, the low, constant hum of the ship's engines vibrating through the floor. I didn't see them at all that first day or night. I ate dinner, alone at a quiet restaurant reserved for suite guests, a perk I hadn't even known existed when I booked. I was starting to think that maybe we'd managed to avoid each other for the entire week. The next evening, I decided to brave the main buffet for dinner. It was a chaotic, lively place, a symphony of clattering plates, loud conversations, and the smell of a dozen different cuisines. I filled my plate and found a small table for two near a window, and then I saw them. They were standing in the dessert line, and they looked miserable. My dad's face was a thundercloud of anger. My mom looked stressed and exhausted, her shoulders slumped. Vanessa was complaining, gesturing wildly with her hands, her expression one of utter disgust. Even from across the room, I could feel the toxic cloud of their disappointment. My mom was the first to see me. Her eyes scanned the room and then locked onto mine. She froze completely, her hand hovering over a slice of chocolate cake. Her face went pale, a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. She nudged my father, who followed her gaze. His eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening. He looked less surprised and more furious, as if my very presence was a personal affront. Finally, Vanessa noticed them staring and turned. Her face, unlike my mother's, flushed a deep, ugly crimson. It wasn't shock on her face. It was the hot shame of being caught. I didn't look away. I didn't hide. I simply took a bite of my salad and met their gazes with a calm, neutral expression. They had a hurried, whispered conference. Then, abandoning the dessert line, they began to walk toward my table, a united front of misery and indignation. My dad spoke first, his voice a low grumble. "What are you doing here?" I swallowed my food and gave them a small, sweet smile. "What do you mean? I'm on vacation." I looked from his face to my mom's, then to Vanessa's. "You said the trip was for just family, and I'm family, so here I am." My words, so simple and true, seemed to stun them into silence. They didn't have a response. Vanessa's eyes darted down to my wrist, where the gold-colored wristband, the keycard for suite guests, was clearly visible. It was a stark contrast to the cheap-looking budget blue plastic bands on their own wrists. Her eyes narrowed with dawning comprehension and rage. Before they could rally, I stood up, taking my plate with me. "Well, this has been lovely," I said brightly. "I'm off to see the show. Enjoy the buffet." I walked away, not looking back, feeling their eyes burning into my back. Later that evening, the real karma was served. I had a reservation at the ship's finest restaurant, the Ocean Prime Steakhouse. I was seated at a cozy table with a perfect view of the entrance. About half an hour into my meal, as I was enjoying A delicious lobster bisque. I saw them arrive at the hostess stand. They were dressed up, a clear attempt to salvage their disastrous vacation. My dad was wearing a blazer, and Vanessa had on a dress that was likely purchased with a credit card she couldn't afford. The hostess greeted them with a polite smile. "Good evening. Do you have a reservation?" "Miller, party of 6, my dad said gruffly. The hostess typed something into her computer. Her smile faltered slightly. "I'm sorry, sir. I don't see a reservation under that name." "Well, we're part of the Miller party," my mom interjected. Her voice strained. "Our daughter booked it for us." The hostess typed again. "I see. And what is your cabin number?" My dad gave her the number. The hostess's expression turned from confused to apologetic. "Oh, I see. I'm very sorry, but the steakhouse is a specialty dining venue. The dining privileges associated with your cabins are for the main dining rooms and the buffet." The color drained from my mom's face. Vanessa, however, went straight to rage. She leaned toward her mother and hissed, her voice sharp enough to carry across the quiet restaurant. "You said Millie paid for everything. You said it was all-inclusive." The hostess looked mortified. Other diners were starting to stare. "I'm terribly sorry," she said, "but there are no premium packages on your account." They stood there for another humiliating minute, arguing in whispers, before turning and storming away. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my wine. A few minutes later, my waiter, a kind man named Marco who had witnessed the entire exchange, approached my table. He leaned in conspiratorially, a smirk playing on his lips. "Your family at the hostess stand," he said softly. They asked if the guest in the penthouse suite, Miss Miller, would be willing to upgrade their dining plan for them. I looked at him. I thought about all the years I had upgraded their lives, paid for their comforts, and rescued them from their own choices. "No," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I don't think I will. They'll manage." Marco nodded, a look of respect in his eyes. "Very good, Miss Miller," he said, and walked away. I was left alone with my steak, my wine, and the sweet, satisfying taste of a boundary finally enforced. The day after the steakhouse incident, an uneasy truce settled over the ship. We were in the Bahamas, and I spent the day on my own excursion, the one I had kept for myself, swimming with dolphins. I moved through the day in a bubble of tranquility, deliberately pushing all thoughts of my family out of my mind. For a few precious hours, I wasn't a daughter or a sister. I was just Millie, a woman on vacation. The feeling was so new and exhilarating that I almost forgot about the drama simmering just below the surface. The avoidance continued for the rest of that day and into the next. I'd see them from a distance. A flash of my dad's angry profile in the casino, the back of Vanessa's head at the crowded Lido deck bar, my mom's slumped figure in a lounge chair. We were like magnets with the same poles, constantly repelling each other in the crowded spaces of the ship. They were clearly avoiding me, and I was more than happy to let them. I was beginning to think, foolishly, that the worst was over. On day 3, I found a quiet spot at the adults-only Serenity pool at the back of the ship. It was a peaceful oasis, a stark contrast to the loud, chaotic main pools. I had a comfortable lounge chair, a thick novel, and a tall, frosty glass of iced tea. The sun was warm on my skin, and the gentle rocking of the ship was lulling me into a state of pure relaxation. I was finally, genuinely happy. And of course, that was when they chose to strike. I sensed them before I saw them. A shadow fell over my book, blocking the sun. I looked up and saw all 3 of them standing over me. My mother, my father, and my sister. They weren't yelling. They were eerily quiet, their faces a mixture of fury and shame. They looked like a tribunal about to pass judgment. My mother was the spokesperson. She stood in the middle, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her knuckles white. Her voice, when she spoke, was a low, trembling whisper that was somehow more menacing than a shout. "How could you do this to us, Millie?" I took a slow sip of my iced tea, my heart starting to beat a little faster. I carefully placed the glass down on the small table next to me and marked my page in my book before closing it. I was not going to let them see me flustered. "I'm not sure what you mean," I said, my voice even. "I'm just sitting here reading my book." "Don't play dumb," Vanessa snapped, stepping forward. Her face was blotchy with anger. "You know exactly what you did. Downgrading our rooms? Canceling our dinners? We are the laughingstock of this entire ship. People are looking at us," my mom added, her voice cracking with self-pity. "They see our blue wristbands. They know we're in the cheap cabins. We look ridiculous." And there it was, the heart of the matter. It wasn't that they had betrayed me. It wasn't that they were sorry for hurting me. It was that they were embarrassed. Their public image, their precious pride had been wounded. They were humiliated, and in their minds that was entirely my fault. A profound and final sense of clarity washed over me. They were incapable of seeing what they had done. They could only see what had been done to them. I looked up at my mother, at her face contorted with a mix of fury and shame, and I felt nothing but a sad, empty pity. "You look ridiculous," I repeated, my voice quiet but carrying in the relative peace of the Serenity deck. A few people on the nearby lounge chairs had started to look over, sensing the drama. "Let me see if I have this straight. You took a $21,000 vacation that I paid for. Then you uninvited me from it via text message because my presence would be awkward. You told the rest of the family that I was too busy with work to come. You kicked me out of the family group chat. You did all of that, and you think you're the ones who look ridiculous?" My mom flinched, her face paling. She had no answer. "You're petty, Millie," Vanessa sneered, trying a different line of attack. "This is all about money with you. It always is. Well, let me tell you something. Money doesn't buy class." The hypocrisy of that statement, coming from a woman who hadn't earned her own money in years and was standing on a cruise ship funded entirely by me, was so staggering that I almost laughed. Instead, I met her gaze, my expression unblinking. "You're right, Vanessa. It doesn't," I said, my voice as cold and clear as ice. "But it does buy tickets. It buys balcony suites and steak dinners and snorkeling trips." I paused, letting the words sink in. "And I'm done buying yours." That was it. That was the final blow. Vanessa's face crumpled in rage. My dad, who had been silent the entire time, just glowering behind my mother, finally muttered, "You ungrateful brat," before turning on his heel. My mom gave me one last look, her eyes filled with a bizarre combination of hatred and a strange, desperate plea, as if she still expected me to fix it all. Then she turned and followed my dad. Vanessa shot me a look of pure venom before storming off after them. They were gone. The confrontation I had been dreading for days was over in less than 5 minutes. I was left in the sudden silence, the sun feeling warm on my skin again. I was aware that half the people on the deck had watched the entire exchange. I could feel their eyes on me. In the past, that kind of public scrutiny would have mortified me. I would have felt a hot flush of shame and wished the deck would open up and swallow me whole, but as I sat there, I felt something entirely different. I felt light. A massive, crushing weight that I had been carrying on my shoulders for my entire life had just been lifted. I picked up my iced tea, my hand perfectly steady. I opened my book back to my marked page, and I continued to read, not caring at all that anyone was watching. For the first time, I was truly, completely, and gloriously on my own. The rest of the cruise passed in a state of strange, unspoken detente. After the meltdown by the pool, my family seemed to understand that confrontation was useless. Their anger was a currency that no longer had any value with me. So they resorted to the only weapon they had left, avoidance. They treated me like a ghost. If I entered a room, they would promptly leave. If we passed in a hallway, they would stare intently at the opposite wall. I became an invisible force, a presence they refused to acknowledge. It was almost comical. I would see them in the buffet line, their plates piled high with the free food, their faces grim and resentful. My dad looked like he was marching into battle every time he went to get a slice of pizza. My mom had a permanently wounded expression, as if she were the heroine in a tragic play. And Vanessa was the picture of sullen boredom, slumped in a chair, endlessly scrolling through her phone, probably fuming that she didn't have the Wi-Fi package to post about her terrible vacation. I, on the other hand, enjoyed myself. I took a cooking class. I saw every show. I sat on my balcony for hours, watching the endless blue of the ocean, feeling a sense of peace that was deeper than simple relaxation. It was the peace of resolution. The drama was over. I had survived. Every time I saw them looking miserable, a small, quiet part of me felt a pang of something that wasn't quite guilt, but a somber acknowledgement of the finality of it all. This was the consequence of their choices. I was simply a spectator to the fallout. On the final morning, the ship docked back in Miami. The festive atmosphere of the past week was replaced by the low-grade stress of thousands of people trying to disembark at once. I had an early breakfast in the suite lounge and then waited in my room until my assigned time was called, avoiding the chaotic crowds. As I stood on my balcony one last time, looking at the port, my purpose was crystal clear. The vacation was over, but my work wasn't quite done. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about closing all the doors, locking all the accounts, and ensuring that there was no way for them to ever re-establish the old dynamic. It was about a clean break. After I disembarked, I found a quiet cafe in the terminal. ordered a coffee, and took out my laptop. First, I called the cruise line's billing department. "Hello," I said, my voice polite and businesslike. "My name is Millie Miller. I'm calling about my recent cruise, booking number 74B3982. I need to dispute several charges on my final invoice." The agent on the other end was professional. "Of course, Miss Miller. Can you please specify which charges you are referring to?" "Certainly," I said, pulling up the original invoice. "I am disputing the charges for 5 shore excursions in the Bahamas, Jamaica, and San Juan. The guests for whom these were booked did not attend." I didn't need to explain why. The records would show that only one person, me, had checked in for any activities. "I see that here," the agent said after a moment. "I can process a refund for those." "Thank you," I continued. "I am also disputing the prorated charges for the premium amenities that were part of the original booking but were canceled prior to the voyage. According to my records, several of the guests were denied access to services that were still partially billed to my account." The agent put me on a brief hold. When he came back, his voice was apologetic. "You are correct, Miss Miller. There seems to have been a billing error. Due to the significant changes in your booking and the issues you've noted, I have been authorized to issue a substantial refund to your account for all non-rendered services and as an apology for the inconvenience." He quoted me a number. It was nearly $6,000, the final repayment for a gift that had been rejected. "Thank you," I said calmly. "I appreciate you resolving this." I closed my laptop and drank my coffee. The refund was more than just money. It was proof. It was the official, documented conclusion that they had not participated in the experience I had provided. But I wasn't done. The cruise was only one part of the web I had built to support them. I logged into my email and searched for the other confirmations. I found the reservation for the hotel near the Miami airport where they were scheduled to spend the night before their flight home the next day. It was a nice hotel with a pool and a restaurant. A comfortable place to decompress after a long trip. The reservation was in my name, secured with my credit card. I clicked the link. A single button appeared on the screen. Cancel reservation. I clicked it without hesitation. A confirmation message popped up. Your reservation has been successfully canceled. Next, I found the email for the black car service I had booked to pick them up from the port and take them to the hotel, and then from the hotel to the airport the next morning. I had wanted them to travel in comfort and style, to feel pampered until the very last moment. I called the company's dispatch number. "Hi," I said. "I need to cancel a booking for this afternoon. The name is Miller." I gave the operator the confirmation number. A moment later, she said, "Okay, the car service for the Miller party has been revoked." Revoked. The word felt powerful. It was a final decisive action. Everything that was tied to my name, to my credit card, to my generosity, was now gone. They were on their own. They would walk out of the cruise terminal, expecting a driver with a sign, and find nothing. They would get to their hotel, expecting a room, and be turned away. They would be stranded in a strange city, with no plans and no one to call for help. A younger version of me would have been horrified by this act. I would have been consumed with guilt, picturing their panic and distress. But sitting there in that cafe, I felt a profound sense of peace. I hadn't stranded them. They had unmoored themselves from me. I was simply acknowledging the reality of the situation they had created. You cannot be cut out of a family and still be expected to pay for their hotels. You cannot be told you are not welcome and still be expected to provide their transportation. This wasn't quiet revenge. It was the logical, necessary conclusion to their own actions. It was the sound of the last financial cord being snipped, clean and final. The week after I returned to Denver was one of the most peaceful I had ever experienced. The silence that had been so unnerving before the cruise now felt like a comforting blanket. I was waiting for the inevitable explosion, the angry phone calls, the barrage of accusatory texts. I expected them to find a way to blame me for the canceled hotel and the revoked car service, to twist the narrative so that I was once again the villain. But the explosion never came. My phone remained silent. I realized they couldn't call me and yell. To do so would be to admit that they had expected me to take care of them even after they had thrown me away. Their pride wouldn't allow it. So they chose silence. And in that silence, I began to heal. I went to work. I met friends for dinner. I enjoyed the quiet solitude of my condo, which for the first time felt truly like my own sanctuary, not just a place they could show up to unannounced. I was building a life without them, and it felt surprisingly good. It felt stable. Then, one evening, exactly 1 week after my return, there was a knock on my door. It wasn't the buzz from the lobby, which meant it was someone who had been let into the building. My heart lurched. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. It was my mother, standing alone in the hallway, her shoulders slumped, looking smaller and older than I had ever seen her. My first instinct was to pretend I wasn't home, to just stand there, silently, until she gave up and went away. It would be the easier path, but I knew it wouldn't be the final one. This was a confrontation that had to happen, the last loose end that needed to be tied. I took a deep breath, unlocked the deadbolt, and opened the door. I didn't open it all the way. I opened it just enough to stand in the space, my body creating a physical barrier. I did not invite her in. She looked up at me, her eyes red-rimmed and swollen. She looked exhausted, defeated. All the usual fire and righteous indignation were gone. In their place was a brittle, weary shame. "Millie," she said, her voice quiet and hoarse. "Mom," I replied, my own voice neutral. We stood there in silence for a long moment. She was clearly waiting for an invitation to come inside, to sit on my couch, to have this conversation on her terms. I did not give it to her. I remained in the doorway, waiting. Finally, she seemed to understand that the old rules no longer applied. She looked down at her hands, twisting the strap of her purse. "We went too far," she admitted, the words barely a whisper. "On the cruise. With the text. We just thought." Her voice trailed off. She was fumbling, trying to find an explanation that would somehow excuse what they had done. I could have let her spin a story about my dad's pride or Vanessa's feelings, but I was done with their stories. I was only interested in the truth. I interrupted her, my voice not loud or angry, but firm and clear, cutting through her excuses. "You thought I would keep paying," I said. "You thought you could cut me out of the family but still get all the benefits of having me in it. You thought you could have the vacation I paid for without me. That's what you thought." She looked up at me, her eyes wide with shock. It was as if I had read her mind, stripping away all her defenses and laying the ugly, simple truth bare between us. She couldn't deny it. She slowly, almost imperceptibly nodded. A single tear rolled down her cheek. In that moment, I saw the entire dynamic of our family with painful clarity. My dad's silence on the matter, his absence from my doorstep, was his pride. He couldn't face me because he couldn't admit he was wrong. Vanessa's absence was her entitlement. She didn't believe she had done anything wrong and felt no need to apologize. It was only my mom, the emotional orchestrator, who had come, not out of true remorse for hurting me, but out of a desperate, last-ditch effort to repair the system that had benefited her for so long. She wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry it had backfired. I looked at her, this woman who was my mother, and I didn't feel rage anymore. I didn't feel a desire for revenge. I just felt a profound and final sense of sadness. Sadness for the relationship we could have had, and for the one we actually did. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't list all the ways they had hurt me over the years. I didn't offer forgiveness because forgiveness felt like an invitation to let them hurt me again. I just stated the new reality. "It's over, Mom," I said, my voice soft but unyielding. "The bank is closed. The rescues are finished." I looked her straight in the eye. "You'll have to learn how to afford your own vacations now." Her face crumpled, but I didn't let it sway me. Her pain was the consequence of her own actions. It was not my responsibility to fix it anymore. Then I did the hardest, most necessary thing I have ever done. I slowly and deliberately closed the door. I didn't slam it. I just pushed it shut until I heard the soft, final click of the latch. It was the sound of a boundary being set in stone. It was the sound of my own freedom. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door and listened as her footsteps faded away down the hall. And for the first time in my life, my home felt truly and completely safe. 6 months later, I took another cruise. This time, I went solo to the Greek Isles. The water wasn't the same Caribbean blue. It was a deep, mesmerizing sapphire. I spent my days exploring ancient ruins on Santorini and my evenings on the ship's deck, watching sunsets that painted the sky in shades of orange and purple. I brought a journal with me, and I filled its pages not with anger or resentment, but with observations about the world and my place in it. I realized, sitting there under the Grecian sky, that peace doesn't come from getting an apology or from fixing people who are determined to be broken. It comes from finally letting them go, from allowing them to live with the consequences of their own choices. My family's problems were never mine to solve. My value was never tied to my generosity. My real worth came from the boundaries I was now strong enough to build. When I got home to Denver, tan and rested, there was a postcard waiting for me in my mailbox. The picture was a generic faded photograph of the mountains. I flipped it over. The handwriting was my mother's. "We're sorry, Millie. We miss you." A year ago, those words would have been a key, unlocking all my defenses and pulling me right back into their dysfunctional orbit. I would have called immediately, ready to forgive, ready to fix, ready to pay. But as I stood there in my entryway, I just smiled. It was a small, sad smile. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt a quiet sense of closure. I took the postcard and tucked it into a drawer with other old mementos, a relic from a life that was no longer mine. Then I went back to my bedroom and started packing for my next trip, a weekend hiking trip to Moab, funded by me, planned by me, and shared only with people who valued me for who I was, not for what I could give them. If you've ever been the one who gives everything to your family only to be cut off, this story is for you. If you've ever felt like your love was just a transaction, I see you. Comment below if you've ever had to learn to say no, because sometimes that tiny word isn't an act of selfishness. It's the first real boundary you build to save your own soul. If this story resonated with you, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel.